Welcome to Rawsome Parents, the podcast where parenting gets real, raw, and awesome. Parenting is messy, magical, and transformational. So whether you're navigating new parenthood, single parenting, co-parenting, or rediscovering yourself after the kids have moved out, you are not alone. Here we share raw truths, heartfelt stories, and playful conversations with parents and experts, because suffering is optional, and together we can lead with love, heal what holds us back, and create lives full of fun and integrity for ourselves and our kids. So grab a coffee, hit subscribe, and join us on this wild ride. Let's get raw and awesome. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Rawsome Parents Podcast with me, Shaun Tucker, and I'm joined today by Nikki Domeney, who is from H2O, People and Culture. And if you don't know Nikki, so she's a solo mom and solopreneur with Indigenous and Celtic heritage. Her practice as a coach and consultant is holistic and has her work with individuals, SMEs, and startups to help them on their journey of self-discovery, defining their why, and supporting their well-being to live and breathe it. She parents and leads consciously, believing all is possible if we can move past fear and limiting beliefs and the perceived pressure of fitting in, when in fact we are all meant to stand out. She supports the healing of people and businesses with an aim at harmonizing workspaces and communities. She believes in, we're all here to create and co-create, bringing our unique gifts, and by doing so, we create a world where well-being is achievable for everyone. So Nikki, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Shaun, for having me.
Such a pleasure. And that bio says so much about the amount of heart you have and I guess the way that you lead. So I'd love to start there.
Yeah.
Really. What does leadership and parenting actually mean to you?
I think it's a little like what you said. It's with the heart. It's funny. I was just reflecting on this. I wrote about this in a co-authored book that I Wholehearted Leadership. But there was a moment when I had my daughter, Sinead, and returning back to work. Okay, I'll fast forward a bit, actually. I was a leader. I was a female leader, the only female leader really in a law firm, going back 25 years ago. And I put my hand up for that role. I was a law clerk, and I'd sort of gone down the psychology route and then decided HR was more what I wanted to do. And there was an opportunity, and I don't know what drove me to it, but I put my hand up and said, I would love this role. So I went on my leadership journey role there. And what I was able to do, which I didn't really understand was a bit of my gift, was I was able to bring heart in the spaces that I was leading with my team. I had a wide range of different personalities, different backgrounds, cultural, neurodiverse. My first experience having someone with neurodiversity. And I before I fell pregnant with Sinead, I'd started to build this beautiful team, and I was starting to get recognised because the service level engagement had increased. And then when I was standing up there giving my maternity leave speech, I remember saying, I'm going to go off and have this baby, and I'm going to come back and bring all of that nurturing style back into enhancing my leadership style. And I looked around the room, and they all were looking at me, with respect, yet not an ounce of resonance about what that actually meant. And to be honest, I actually felt like, oh, what am I saying? This is, So I just was being authentic, yet I also didn't know where my place was with that, because it was a corporate setting. It was, and anyway, so I ended up, I remember coming back from mat leave. Sinead was 6 months old, and I just remember looking at my wardrobe, and although my body shape had changed slightly, they still fitted me, but I was having a challenge resembling what I was going to walk into as a person I thought I should be versus who I need to be. So it is with the heart. It's absolutely with that nurturing capacity. It's about cultivating confidence in that person. My children, Sinead, has often said you're like the compass. So, my job is to help them go on their journey. And I remember being pregnant with Sinead and having a Landmark Forum event. I don't know whether you remember Landmark, but yeah. And this woman stood up, and I was a step parent at this stage to Brooke, who was about 10 then. And I'd realised that I'd done a few things incorrectly, because she sort of said, we're not here to make our kids happy. We're here to give them the tools. And so for me, that's what I do in terms of leading and people and culture is helping people to find who they are and give them opportunity to find their own tools or access them or share my knowledge to give them the tools.
Yeah, that's incredibly powerful and a lot to unpack, but I would actually love to lean into the space of, in your bio, you wrote a lot to do with fear and limiting beliefs. And when you're in your heart, those fears and limiting beliefs are still there, aren't they?
Oh, yes, they are. I mean, there's a reason why there's a word called Braveheart, I think, because it's, very much, you have to stand there in your authentic space and really just, Brené Brown talks about being in the arena. I've had many experiences where I've had to go to leaders and say, look, what I'm wanting to do is going to be impacted by how you can grow that leadership muscle. So, and then showing them a way a little bit, because it's challenging, like being a parent, you're sort of, you're not given a manual.
Yeah, that's pretty spot on. Let alone us as humans having a manual for how we're supposed to operate in this vast, crazy world.
Yes, and I think you would probably agree with me, Shaun. Throw the manual out the window in some ways, because I think finding that authentic way of being is actually, in some ways, saying we don't need a manual to do it. We just need to trust our heart and empower others to trust themselves. And I certainly feel like I've gotten, as I said, my stepdaughter Brooke's now 33. I think we used to call her the guinea child. I feel like I've learned a lot. I actually remember being in a roundtable conversation with a bunch of business owners, and I was the guest. And because I was the people and culture coach, there was a lot of questions directed at me. They were using that opportunity to really, I guess, gain knowledge. And I just remember saying that to one gentleman. No, somebody asked the question around leadership, and I just sort of said, okay, so for those of you in the room with your parents, put your hand up. And, most of them did. I said, well, leading is like being a parent, and this really lovely, humble guy, they're sort of manufacturing business or whatever. He said, so what do you do if you've had a really bad day, for instance, and you've taken it out on one of your staff members? You've lost a big sale and you've projected that.
Yeah.
Similar to if I was at home and I went home and took it out on my family and kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, so what do you do when you've done that, when you've gone home and you've taken out those challenges with your family and your kids? And he said, I stop and think about it and I apologize. And then I recognize what I'm going to do differently and share that. And I said, that's what leading is, Yet nowadays we've got so much access to amazing training, and we are talking about leadership and the value of it in such a, in a lot more detailed way, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because there's so much science and there's so much like knowledge and education out there, but how much of it is theory and how much of it is practice?
It's practice. Having the theory in your back pocket is so much value, yet the only way you're ever going to do it is actually just continually. I'll be continually on a leadership journey, because, what I find is I'm working with people to really say, all right, we want to embody a culture different to what we've had in the past.
Mm.
And so to do that, they have to let go of whatever stories they had that created that culture in the first place to reinvent or, change the story, change the narrative.
Yeah.
And so every time I'm met with somebody who's sort of unpacking their own trauma or the way that they're showing up, that's actually limiting the capacity to live and breathe that culture, I too am confronted with whatever, challenges on my own journey, because we're, the coach is always needing the coach and
we're all mirrors, aren't we? Really? We're
yeah,
all mirrors of one another, and whatever someone is projecting, that we have to respond to.
yes,
And
yeah,
for us to, I guess, lead in a meaningful way, it has to come consciously,
yeah,
which
that's
that
right.
example of that, the humble fella who raised his hand and said, how do you actually implement this?
Mm,
Re- reflect on your parenting style,
yeah,
right? If you're making mistakes parenting, mistakes are there for you to learn.
yeah, yeah, and it's that consciousness around it, really, isn't it? Creating a conscious way of being.
It's moving from reactivity.
Yes, it's funny. I was running with a friend a couple of months ago, and I was just thinking about this the other day again, because in some ways I wish I could have gone back and done something differently about this. But there was a man talking to his little boy who was crying. He was a toddler, and I was a little judgy because he was almost that where it's stop the crying. What are you crying about? Seeing this little tantrum that was playing out is poor behaviour. And what I recognized, and I knew it then, but I was still confronted with it at that point, because in fact, it's probably because I've done a lot more work in it, and I understand that what that man really needed was empathy,
Yeah.
because he was probably raised in a way where that was not, it was seen as bad behavior, opposed to this is a young little guy he's got an emotion, he's trying to move through the emotion.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I feel like in some ways I know that I could probably have done something different in that situation, as simple as going up and maybe just giving both of them a bit of a love and just emphasizing just moments like that I find where you can really make an influence on supporting people's capacity to become more conscious about it.
Yeah. It's just becoming more responsive, isn't it, really? Because you don't actually need to do anything. It's more just how you perceive it and change how you respond to it, really.
Yeah, and a lot of the work that I do is around exactly that. I've done this amazing Evolved Communities is a Indigenous, well, it's a one Indigenous, Auntie Munya and Carla, and their goal is to make Australia kinder through Indigenous reconciliation practices. And I did this training last year, which was very healing for me in terms of my own journey and understanding my ancestral story, and then also just for the work that I do. And I realized, this is some of the work that I've been doing, but they use 3 R's, which is reflect, relate, and reconcile. And so a lot of what I have been doing before I had those 3 R's as a framework, which again is just another set of tools in my pocket, was having people slow down and just have a think about what the emotion is and get curious about it, and then not react, but respond with a relatedness. So, and then that's where the healing comes, the reconciliation, trying to find a middle ground to create that deeper self-awareness and consciousness.
Yeah, because it takes so much for us to become conscious, right? There's so much that's playing in this moment right now. Like there's our beliefs, there's our family beliefs, there's our values, what we value, but there's also the collective, society's kind of beliefs and expectations of how one should be.
Yes.
Right. And something that I don't even know where this came from, but that's right. It was through a conversation about, dogs and horses or whatever kind of pet or animal. When they get into that killer instinct of fight mode, right? It's kill switch engaged, meaning they're not going to stop. And this is how people end up in prison. Humans too. It's not just animals, right? We're also an animal species. And how we respond to what's happening there can change how they are in that moment too. Because it comes back to the environment, right? If we can impact the environment that we're in, we can make a shift.
That's it. Yeah.
And they've known this in, yoga culture for thousands of years. If I change my breath, I can change things outside of me easily. I can bring on rain.
The gift of the breath. Absolutely.
It's wild.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it goes back to, you spoke of those. That's the survivor instinct in us. And it's, and we need that in all of us. Yet by bringing in the breath, bringing in the capacity to pause and reflect, that's where I've seen some amazing transformation, people, leaders, where they've moved from that survival to thrive because they're moving more into their creative space, a safe place, and then the groundedness that you get from that. Yeah.
Which is really interesting that you mentioned safety, because it all does come back to that. The hierarchy of needs, safety is literally at the bottom.
Absolutely.
If you don't feel safe, you're not going to be able to move past that.
That's right. So, I certainly know that's because of my lived experience as well. Like it took me a little while to realize that I actually lived a lot of my life in fight flight because of the different sort of traumas. And then recognizing when I was having a debrief with my coach on the assessment tool that I use, and he'd said in my values, creativity was really high, but in my attributes, it was really low. And I was like, why is that? And he said, because you're not doing the things, Nikki, you're surviving. You've still got that survival. You're not choosing to do the activities that will have you create. And as soon as he said that, I was like, light bulb. So it gave me permission to go and invest in more of the creative things. And then that helps you move from the fear to the fear is going to sit there. I'm studying performing arts, and it has been the most liberating experience, yet the most terrifying experience. Here is a person who, in high school didn't want to do her English assignment, getting up in front of a group of students to do her English.
That too.
Yeah.
Yep. The English, what was it? The oral presentation or something?
Yeah, Year 12 assessment. Oh my goodness. To now last year I said it out loud. I might have a performance this year. And then I enrolled at Collards and I had to do an audition. And then I did my first ever performance. And it was terrifying. Yet what I noticed by day 3 or the second assessment, which we had the costume rehearsal, and then we had the first go, and then the second one was so much better because I was able to get into the flow of it and really practice the well-being stuff, the breathing, the meditating, and just loving how that all supports your creativity and how that then goes into workplaces. Self-expression, leadership is all around that. Self-leadership, finding that sovereignty to feel safe, trusting yourself to speak your truth, and then role modeling that so others feel safe to do that as well.
And that's really the same for parenting, right? Is we're just the example that our kids will lean into, really. Yeah. We're their primary role model at the beginning. I mean, as they get older, there's less and less influence on a child's upbringing and how they then interact and respond to the world. But it starts with us.
And as the solo parent, my children have definitely seen my journey. And I didn't do it for this, but I did have this experience where I was an extra in a Hollywood movie last year, and I told my son about it, and Lucas was like, "That's really cool, Mum, John Cena." And I'm like, "Oh, who's John Cena?" And then I looked him up. Anyway, so I told my daughter, Zac Efron was in the movie, and I told Sinead, who she's 22 now, so she grew up with High School Musical as a thing. Anyway, I told her, and it must have landed with her. So fast forward, I come home, I text her. It was filmed at the Melbourne Grand Casino, and I texted her to say, Zach said to say hello, and she's come back with this laughing emoji. I come home at the end of the day, and Lucas was like, "How was it, Mum?" I said, "It was really cool." She said, "Did you see Zach? Did you see John?" I said, "Yeah, they walked right past me." Sinead it landed for her, and she was like, "Oh my God, oh my gosh, you were joking." Fast forward a week later, we're having brunch, and she said, "Other than childbirth, Mum, that's the coolest thing you've ever done." And I didn't do it for that reason. I did it because I was exploring this creativity, and I absolutely loved it. And that's really what inspired me to look at where this creativity takes me, because I was looking at the way the director was working. Anyway, yeah, but it was just like, I'm role modeling at now 50 that, we're never too old to learn and find parts of ourselves that, it's like returning to yourself, parts of us, when I told my siblings that I was studying or got into performing arts, of course you did, but it was certainly, it wasn't, didn't have access to that as a kid, so, being able to sort of role model that for my children who, whether it's their sport or their creativity or whatever their path they choose, it's choosing things that bring them joy, that help them self-express, find parts of themselves.
Yeah. Allowing that curiosity to really flourish.
Yeah. Yes. No judgment. Just get curious about it. No attachment. It can be challenging. My son's an amazing basketball player, and it's really helped his confidence. He was diagnosed with ADHD in grade 4 and just had some residual of self-esteem challenges through that. So when he discovered basketball and that he was quite gifted with it, there was periods of time where he'd sort of been attached to that as his identity, because all of a sudden he was getting noticed for that and cheered on. And so I've often had to just remind him that he's not his basketball. And so it affects how he plays. Sometimes if he's so attached to it, it actually affects his ability to play, opposed to when he's in there and in the flow and he's actually, enjoying it. He's breathing, he's in his body, and he's not attached to the outcome. And that's where we get, the results. I can say that Sinead, with her singing, songwriting, she's, really an amazing, gifted singer-songwriter who, I used to watch her say, "I don't want to go to singing." And then I'm like, you go to singing. Then I'd see her come home and she's skipping and she's realizing, she's taken that next step to getting past any anxiety,
Yeah. No, that's really, really cool. It sounds like your kids are quite amazing in what they're doing. And, that really does come back as a reflection of yourself and you connecting to that, I guess, like curious being, really.
Yeah. Yes. And it's been a journey because, I've had to let go of my own self-judgments and we probably will be forever. It's just noticing it more as you get older. But it feels very much now. And I look back at the young woman who was about to be a mum, who was a stepmom already, and saying what I did, that I'm going to go off and bring all of this, this nurturing into back into this team is what I've been doing at H2O. It just now feels more authentic because I'm trusting that and the outcomes and the results are there, so seeing people really move past their own limiting beliefs around their leadership.
I think that's really, really cool. So I'd love to lean into that a little bit, right? So when you, going back to, I guess, the start of your parenting, when you first maybe even became a stepmom or when you had your first child, knowing what you know now, all the lived experience and all of the knowledge and everything you have now, what would you tell your younger self at that moment where suddenly there was a dependent child in your care?
Trust. that all you really need is love, and it's self-love. I was 19 when I became a step parent.
Mm.
And yeah, that next, between 20 and 30 was, you're trying to work out who you are. And I've certainly had some experiences that impacted my identity. And yeah, just trusting that love is, nothing brings me more joy now than, there was, I think it was last year, I was in the room where the three of them were there with my step, I'd call her my step granddaughter. And it was just felt like it's done. It is beautiful. They're amazing human beings. And, I contributed to that, and I made mistakes, but I think that the gift was trusting that it's okay to say you're not perfect. And I think that's what I role modeled the most, is that I was able to say I've mucked up, or what part did I own in that, and I can see that even in the way my children relate to one another. My sister, my daughter Sinead's sometimes a little bit harder on Lucas. He's surrounded by all these really strong women who, but as a result, the conversations they have are really conscious conversations. We went and saw the Barbie movie together, and it was like, let's unpack the Barbie movie. And he's 16 now, and just really heart-centered, authentic
Yeah.
children. Yeah.
I think that's so cool. And like I said before, it's your authenticity that's shining through. And that's what you now see as the reflection coming back.
Yes. And that's where the trust comes in. Like, just be authentic, and trust that that's enough.
Mm.
In fact, yeah, that's all you need.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that little bit of wisdom, because I agree with you. It's love has to be at the absolute center, and you can't have love without trust, because the whole way we describe love is falling in love, isn't it?
Yes.
And what does that really mean? You can't actually hold it. You can't push it out and push it onto someone. You literally have to fall.
Yes.
And what's ironic is humans are absolutely terribly afraid of falling. It's one of the first fears that are actually innate.
Yeah. So that is really what H2O do. We allow them a space to fall. Like, bring love. Like, I'm in meetings where we're talking about love in a meeting, like, had I not trusted that and got out of my own way, I wouldn't have been able to support these really felt conversations where people are starting to feel safe
Yeah.
to fall.
Yeah, because it doesn't matter if you're going to collapse and really hurt yourself. You're still going to be caught, right? So no matter what, falling is the action that happens, but it's just the trust that I'm gonna hit the ground.
Yeah.
And the environment is the support that creates safety.
Absolutely.
You can fall on the hard concrete, or you can fall on a trampoline surface. It's really up to you, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And if you build, as a leader, if you build a team around that you have empowered and you've handed trust over, a lot of the work that I do is helping leaders hand over, because it's their baby again. They've started a business, and no one looks after their baby like they do. And I know, because I've been self-employed for 17 years. Yet being able to say, this is going to serve me better and my well-being if I hand over these things, because the bits that bring me joy are not these things. And so if I can bring in the people who have a resonance to my vision and they're good at what they do, that trust is so much easier to establish. And so then you fall. I've heard, leaders say, "Oh, they don't have my back." And I'm like, "Are you sure? Let's test this theory." And then all of a sudden they're building this new trust, they're representing self-trust as well, because it's letting go of things and falling, as you said.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. And Well, we're actually running out of time today, Nikki. So I just want to say thank you so much for being here and sharing your wisdom and your experience, because there's just so much that you've embodied that I think is really beautiful. And now being able to show that, not just tell people, show that to other leaders who, I feel like the leadership space and the parenting space, there's so much unknown and there's so much theory and information available that it's hard to depict what is actually working. And from our conversations previously, but also now, this conversation, it just shows me how much you really embodied leading from that heart space and not being afraid to fall. So
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shaun. I feel seen. Really
Awesome.
grateful for your work. Really
No
grateful
worries.
for your work.
Yeah. And lastly, so if people want to get in contact and find out what you're up to, where's the best place to connect with you and see what you're up to?
So LinkedIn is the place to go. I have a website, 20people.com.au. I am in the process of scaling up and doing some offerings on my website. So that's a work in progress, yet there's definitely a Reach Me page there. And then I'm sure there'll be socials connected in this.
Yes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So they can find me LinkedIn, Facebook, website, and I'm always a phone call away too. My number's on there as well.
Awesome. So yeah, if you want to get into contact with Nikki, please feel free. I'll put all the social handles and her website at the bottom of this podcast episode. And if you've liked this episode with Nikki and you'd like to get her back on again, please let us know in the comments section or just message us directly and we'll make sure that it happens. So thank you, Nikki, for being here. Thank you all for listening in and have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thanks, Shaun.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for tuning in to Rawsome Parents, where we keep it raw, real, and awesome. If you loved this episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. Your support helps us reach more parents just like you. And hey, remember, parenting is a wild ride, but you're never in it alone. If you need more support or just want to connect, find me on social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram at the Shaun Tucker. Until next time, stay raw, stay awesome, and keep leading with love. See you soon.